The Dralith High Command was not pleased. Word of Vorath's role in the rescue operation had spread across the outpost and beyond. Within 3 days, every soldier in the sector knew that a paralyzed Dralith commander had saved over 200 lives from his wheelchair. High Commander Nethrak arrived at Vareth 9 outpost on the morning of the 4th day. He was a towering figure with scales, the color of polished obsidian, and eyes that had seen 1,000 battles. He had come to restore order and to remind everyone of what Dralith honor truly meant. Vorath was summoned to the main hangar bay for his judgment. Sergeant Unipark pushed his wheelchair through the corridors and refused to let anyone else take over. "You should not be involved in this," Vorath told her quietly. "The High Commander will not appreciate human interference." "I did not ask for his appreciation," Una replied when they arrived at the hangar bay. Vorath was surprised by what he found. A crowd had gathered near the landing platform where the High Commander's shuttle rested. There were humans and the Sari and Keth, and even some Dralith soldiers standing in loose formation. They were not there to witness Vorath's disgrace. They were there to support him. Captain Dren Sahal stood at the front of the Dralith contingent with young Toffin beside him. Dren met Vorath's eyes and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. High Commander Nethrak strode down the shuttle ramp with 2 honor guards flanking him. His expression was cold, and his posture radiated displeasure. "Commander Vorath Keln," he said in a voice that echoed through the hangar, "you have brought shame upon our people." "How have I done that?" Vorath asked calmly. "You appeared in public in your damaged state," Nethrak said. "You took command of a military operation without authorization, and you allowed yourself to be displayed as a spectacle for other species to observe. I saved 200 lives." Vorath replied, "You should have died with honor instead of living without it." Nethrak said, "Your continued existence is an embarrassment to the Dralith Empire." The hangar fell silent. Vorath felt the weight of those words pressing down on him like a physical force. For his entire life, he had believed exactly what Nethrak was saying. A warrior without function was worthless. A body without strength was shameful. Death was preferable to disability. But 3 weeks of rehabilitation with Una had changed something inside him. He had seen humans who had lost limbs and rebuilt their lives. He had learned that a person was more than their body. He had discovered that strength came in many forms and fighting was only one of them. "Permission to speak?" "High Commander," Una said. Suddenly Nethrak turned to look at her with cold disdain. "You are human," he said. "You have no standing to address me." "Then I will address everyone else," Una said, and she raised her voice so the entire hangar could hear. "On Earth we have a saying that a person's worth is not measured by what they can do, but by what they choose to do." She stepped forward and stood beside Vorath's wheelchair. Commander Vorath chose to throw himself on an explosion to save 3 young soldiers, she said. He did not hesitate, and he did not calculate the odds, and he simply acted because protecting others was more important than protecting himself. She looked at the crowd gathered in the hangar. When his body was broken, his own people abandoned him, she said. They told him he was worthless, and they encouraged him to kill himself, and they pretended he did not exist. Her voice grew stronger with each word. But when there was a crisis, he did not hide in his room feeling sorry for himself, she said. He came to the command center, and he used his mind and his experience to save over 200 lives. She turned back to Nethrak. "That is not shame," she said. "That is the definition of honor." The hangar was silent for a long moment. Then Toffin stepped forward and stood on Vorath's other side. "The commander saved my life during the explosion," he said loudly. "I would not be standing here without him, and I will not pretend that he is worthless." Captain Dren Sahal moved forward as well. "Commander Vorath was my teacher and my mentor for 15 years, he said. "I was wrong to abandon him, and I will not make that mistake again." One by one, the soldiers who had been saved during the rescue operation stepped forward. Humans and Nisari and Keth and even more Dralith joined the growing crowd around Vorath's wheelchair. They did not touch him or speak to him directly. They simply stood beside him in silent support. Nethrek looked at the assembly with something like shock in his ancient eyes. "This is unprecedented," he said quietly. "Yes," Vorath said. "It is." He wheeled himself forward until he was facing the High Commander directly. "I have spent the last 3 weeks learning something new," Vorath said. "The humans taught me that a body is only a tool, and that the person inside is what truly matters. That is not the Dralith way." Nethrek said, "Then perhaps the Dralith way needs to change," Vorath replied. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Nethrek was silent for a very long time. Everyone in the hangar held their breath. Finally, the High Commander spoke in a voice that was quieter than before. "There is an old title in our history," he said. "It has not been used in over 4 centuries because we forgot what it meant." "What title?" Vorath asked. "Keeper of Strategy," Nethrek said. "It was given to warriors whose bodies failed, but whose minds remained sharp, and they served as advisors and teachers and guides for younger generations." He looked at Vorath with something that might have been respect. "I came here to remove you from service," he said. "But perhaps I was wrong." He straightened his posture and raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Commander Vorath Kaln," he announced. "By the authority of the Dralith High Command, I hereby grant you the title of Keeper of Strategy, with all the rights and responsibilities that title carries." A murmur of surprise ran through the crowd. "You will remain on this outpost as a tactical advisor," Nethrek continued. "Your experience and knowledge are too valuable to waste, and it seems the humans have reminded us of something we should never have forgotten." He turned and walked back toward his shuttle without another word. The honor guards followed him, and the shuttle lifted off and disappeared into the sky. Vorath sat in his wheelchair and tried to understand what had just happened. He was not being sent away in disgrace. He was being given a new purpose. He was being allowed to live. Yuna knelt beside him with tears in her eyes. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it," Vorath corrected. "I would not be here without you." In the weeks that followed, the outpost began to change. Other species started sending their injured soldiers to Yuna for rehabilitation. A Thesari warrior with a missing arm arrived first, and then a Keth drone with damaged sensory organs. They came because they had heard rumors of a place where broken warriors were not discarded. Vorath trained young officers in tactics and strategy from his wheelchair. He shared knowledge that he had accumulated over decades of warfare. He became something he had never expected to be. He became a teacher. One morning, a new transport arrived, carrying a single passenger. It was a young Dralith soldier with bandages covering half his face and one arm ending at the elbow. He had been injured in a border skirmish, and his unit had told him he was no longer useful. Vorath wheeled forward to meet him at the landing platform. "What is your name?" he asked. "Sergeant Corvin," the young soldier replied. "I was told there is someone here who helps broken warriors." "There is," Vorath said, "and you are not broken." He turned his wheelchair and gestured for Corvin to follow. "You are just different now," Vorath said, "and different is not the same as worthless." Behind them, Yuna watched with a smile on her face. The sun was rising over the mountains of Vareth 9. It was going to be another long day of hard work, but for the first time in a very long time, Vorath was looking forward to it. He had learned something important from the stubborn human who refused to give up on him. A body could fail, but a spirit could endure. All it took was one person willing to believe in you when everyone else had walked away. One person was enough to change everything. The distress signal came in the middle of the night and changed everything. A civilian transport ship had crashed on the surface of Vareth 9, approximately 50 kilometers from the outpost. The ship was carrying over 200 refugees from a war-torn colony world. Initial scans showed that the crash site was located in a region known as the shifting valleys where unstable atmospheric pockets could kill an unprotected person in seconds. Captain Dren Sahal assembled the rescue teams. Within the hour, he selected the best soldiers from every species on the outpost and gave them their orders with cold efficiency. Vorath watched the preparations from his room through a security feed that Toffin had secretly connected to his datapad. He saw the teams loading equipment and checking their atmospheric suits. He saw officers studying maps and arguing about the best approach vectors. And he saw immediately that they were making a terrible mistake. They are going to get themselves killed. He said quietly. Sergeant Una Park stood beside his wheelchair with her arms crossed. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Look at their approach route," Vorath said, pointing at the datapad. "They are planning to come in from the east, but the atmospheric readings show that the eastern valleys have the highest concentration of toxic pockets." Una leaned closer to study the data. "You are right," she said. "But why would the command team make such an obvious error?" "Because they are using standard rescue protocols," Vorath said. "Those protocols were designed for stable terrain, and this region is anything but stable." He pulled up additional data on the atmospheric conditions, and his mind began working in ways it had not worked since before his injury. The northern approach would be safer, but only during the first 3 hours after sunset. He said, "After that, the wind patterns shift and create new danger zones." "How do you know all this?" Una asked him. "Because I studied this moon for 6 months before we built the outpost," Vorath replied. "I know every valley and every ridge, and every dangerous pocket of gas, and the current command team does not." The first rescue team departed 20 minutes later. Within an hour, the communications array began filling with desperate voices. The team had encountered exactly the dangers that Vorath had predicted. 3 soldiers were incapacitated by toxic exposure. The rest were pinned down in a narrow canyon with no safe path forward. Captain Dren Sahal sent a second team to help, but they encountered the same problems from a different direction. Now there were 2 teams trapped along with the original crash survivors. Vorath watched the disaster unfold on his datapad and felt something burning in his chest. It was not anger exactly. It was something closer to purpose. "Take me to the command center," he said. Una looked at him with uncertainty in her eyes. "They will not let you inside," she said. "You are not part of the command structure anymore." "Then we will not ask permission," Vorath replied. Una smiled slowly, and Vorath realized that she had been waiting for him to say exactly those words. They moved through the corridors of the outpost as quickly as the wheelchair would allow. Toffin appeared from a side passage and fell in beside them. "I heard what is happening," he said. "The rescue teams are in serious trouble." "I know," Vorath said, "and I know how to get them out." They reached the command center, and Una pushed the wheelchair through the doors without hesitation. The room fell silent as everyone turned to stare at them. Captain Dren Sahal stood at the central console with a look of exhausted desperation on his face. His eyes went wide when he saw Vorath. "What is this?" he demanded. "Commander Vorath is not authorized to be in this area." "Then authorize him," Una said calmly. "Because your rescue teams are dying, and he is the only one who can save them." "That is absurd," Dren said. "He cannot even walk. His legs do not work." Una replied, "But his mind works perfectly fine, and that is what you need right now." The room was filled with tension as Dren stared at his former commander. Vorath could see the conflict in his eyes. Pride and tradition told him to throw them out, but the lives of his soldiers were at stake. "Show me," Dren said finally. Vorath wheeled himself to the central console and studied the tactical display. "Your teams are approaching from the wrong vectors," he said. "The eastern and southern routes are death traps right now because of the atmospheric conditions. The standard protocols indicate those are the safest approaches." One of the other officers argued. "The standard protocols are wrong," Vorath said. They were designed for average conditions, and nothing about this situation is average. He began manipulating the display with his hands, and his fingers moved with speed and precision that surprised everyone watching. "There is a narrow window of safe passage through the northern valleys," he said. "It opens in 47 minutes and closes 2 hours after that." "How can you be certain?" Dren asked. "Because I spent 6 months learning every detail of this terrain." Vorath replied. "I was the one who recommended this location for the outpost, and I know things about these valleys that are not in any database." He pulled up wind pattern data and overlaid it with atmospheric readings. "If you redirect your teams now, they can reach the crash site through the northern passage," he said. "But they need to move immediately, and they need to follow this exact route." He traced a path across the display that wound through the valleys like a thread through a maze. Dren studied the route with growing amazement. "This would never occur to me," he admitted quietly. "That is because you think in straight lines," Vorath said without malice. "I think in patterns." The room was silent as Dren made his decision. "Do it," he said finally. "Redirect all teams to the northern approach and follow Commander Vorath's route exactly." The next 3 hours were the most intense of Vorath's life. He sat at the command console and directed the rescue operation with absolute focus. His voice was calm and steady as he guided the teams through the dangerous valleys. He anticipated problems before they occurred and adjusted the route in real time as conditions changed. Soldiers on the ground followed his instructions without question. They did not know that the voice in their ears belonged to a paralyzed Dralith warrior who could not even stand. They only knew that whoever was guiding them seemed to know exactly what they were doing. When the last survivor was loaded onto the evacuation transport, a cheer went up in the command center. 217 lives had been saved. Every soldier who went into the valleys came back alive. Captain Dren Sahal stood beside Vorath's wheelchair with something like shame in his eyes. "I should have consulted you from the beginning," he said quietly. "Yes," Vorath agreed. "You should have. I was wrong to abandon you." Dren continued. "I was afraid of what it would mean if I accepted that you were still valuable." "And what would it mean?" Vorath asked. Dren did not answer, because he did not have to. If Vorath was still valuable, then the Dralith traditions about disabled warriors were wrong. And if those traditions were wrong, then everything built upon them was also wrong. It was easier to pretend that Vorath was already dead than to face that uncomfortable truth. The celebration in the command center continued, but Vorath felt suddenly exhausted. Una wheeled him toward the door, and no one tried to stop them. "You did something incredible tonight," she said as they moved through the corridor. "I did what I was trained to do," Vorath replied. "No," Una said firmly. "You did something you were never trained to do, and you proved that you were still exactly who you always were." Vorath looked down at his useless legs, and for the first time, they did not feel like a curse. They felt like a challenge that he was finally ready to accept. Sergeant Una Park had broken at least 7 regulations, and she did not care. She had taken over a storage room in the lower section of the outpost and converted it into a private rehabilitation space. She had borrowed equipment from the human medical supplies without proper authorization. She had adjusted her duty schedule to spend extra hours with a patient who was not officially under her care. And when her commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Chun, called her into his office to explain herself, she stood at attention and did not apologize. "You understand that what you are doing violates protocol," Chun said. "Yes, sir," Una replied. "You understand that the Dralith High Command has filed a formal complaint about your involvement with Commander Vorath." "Yes, sir." "You understand that I could have you transferred off this outpost tomorrow." "Yes, sir." Chun leaned back in his chair and studied her face. "Why are you doing this?" "Sergeant," he asked quietly. "Because no one else will," Una said. "And because it is the right thing to do?" Chum was silent for a long moment. "Get out of my office," he said finally. "And do not get caught again." Una returned to the storage room where Vorath was waiting in his wheelchair. He had been resistant at first, refusing to participate in any exercises, but something had changed. In the past week, the anger in his eyes had been replaced by something else. It was not hope exactly, but it was closer to hope than despair. "You were disciplined," Vorath said. "I heard the other humans talking. It does not matter," Una said. "It matters to me," Vorath said slowly. "You are risking your career for someone who is not even of your species." Una shrugged and began setting up the exercise equipment. "Humans do strange things sometimes," she said. "We cannot help it." The rehabilitation sessions were brutal and exhausting. Vorath's legs were useless, but his arms still functioned perfectly. Una focused on building his upper body strength through a series of exercises that left him trembling and covered in sweat. "Why are you pushing me so hard?" Vorath demanded after a particularly difficult session. "What is the point of having strong arms if I cannot walk?" "Because you can still move," Una said. "You can still push yourself in a chair, and you can still lift objects, and you can still fight if you have to." "Fight," Vorath repeated with bitter laughter. "I cannot even stand." "Humans have warriors who fight from chairs," Una said. "They train differently, but they are no less dangerous." She handed him a datapad with images and videos from Earth. Vorath watched in silence as humans with missing limbs competed in athletic events. He saw people in wheelchairs playing aggressive sports and climbing mountains and doing things that should have been impossible. "These are not soldiers," he said. "Some of them are," Una replied. "And even the ones who are not have the same spirit that makes a soldier, and they refuse to let their bodies define what they could do." Vorath set down the datapad and looked at his own useless legs. "On Dralith, these people would be hidden away," he said quietly. "Their families would speak of them as if they were already dead." "That sounds lonely," Una said. "It is practical," Vorath said. "A warrior who cannot fight is a burden on the collective, and emotions cannot change that reality." "But it is not reality," Una said. "It is a choice that your culture made a long time ago, and choices can be changed." Before Vorath could respond, the storage room door opened. A young Dralith soldier stood in the entrance, his face pale with nervousness. Vorath recognized him immediately. His name was Toffin, and he was one of the 3 soldiers that Vorath had protected during the explosion. "Commander," Toffin said quietly, "I should not be here." "Then why are you here?" Vorath asked. Toffin stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Because I owe you my life," he said. "And I cannot pretend that you do not exist. The others have managed quite well," Vorath said coldly. "The others are cowards," Toffin said. And there was fire in his young voice. "They talk about honor all day long, but they abandon the one who showed them what real honor looks like." Vorath felt something tighten in his chest. "You should not speak that way about your superiors," he said. "Maybe not," Toffin agreed. "But I am tired of pretending that what they are doing is right." He turned to Una with respect in his eyes. "I want to help," he said. "Tell me what to do, and I will do it." Una smiled, and it was the first real smile Vorath had seen on her face. "Can you carry heavy equipment without anyone noticing?" she asked. "I can try," Toffin said. "Then we could use your help." Word spread quietly through the human quarters of the outpost. Other human soldiers began finding reasons to visit the storage room. They brought spare equipment and extra food and medical supplies that had been lost in the system. Private Santos covered Una's shifts when she needed extra time. Corporal Kim stood guard outside the storage room to warn them if anyone was coming. Dr. Weston, the senior human physician, began making unofficial visits to check on Vorath's progress. "Why are you all doing this?" Vorath asked one evening. You gain nothing from helping me. The humans looked at each other and seemed puzzled by the question. We are helping because you need help. Santa said simply. That is what humans do, but I am not human, Vorath said. That does not matter, Kim replied. Need is need. Vorath thought about this. For a long time after they left, he had fought alongside humans for years, but he had never really understood them. They were strange creatures who formed attachments based on emotion rather than logic. They helped strangers and risked themselves for people they barely knew. They saw value in broken things and refused to accept that anything was truly beyond repair. It was inefficient and irrational and completely unlike the Drellith way, and yet here he was, growing stronger every day because of their stubborn kindness. One night, after everyone else had gone, Una sat beside him in the quiet storage room. You are making progress, she said. Your upper body strength has improved by 40%. Progress toward what? Vorath asked. I still cannot walk, and I still cannot fight. Maybe fighting is not the only thing worth doing. Una said Vorath considered her words for his entire life. He had been defined by his ability to fight. He had trained for combat since childhood and had never imagined any other existence. But his mind was still sharp. His tactical knowledge was still intact. His experience and wisdom had not been damaged by the explosion. What else is there? He asked quietly. You tell me, Una said. You have spent your whole life learning how to win battles, and that knowledge does not disappear just because your legs stopped working. She stood up and stretched her tired muscles. Think about it, she said. And tomorrow we will work on your arms again. She left him alone in the storage room outside. The stars were bright and cold. Above the outpost, Vorath looked up at them through the small window and remembered all the battles he had fought across those distant points of light. He had been a great warrior once. Maybe he could still be something else. Maybe the human was right. Maybe the body was only a tool and the person inside was what really mattered. He did not know yet, but for the first time since the explosion, he wanted to find out. The explosion ripped through the eastern wall of the outpost and sent Commander Vorath Count flying through the air like a broken toy. He had seen the grenade rolling toward the three young soldiers, and his body had moved before his mind could think. He threw himself over them and wrapped his arms around their heads, and then the world became fire and noise and terrible pain when he woke up. He could not feel his legs. The medical bay of Vareth 9 outpost smelled like chemicals and fear. Vorath stared at the ceiling and tried to move his toes, but nothing happened. He tried again and again, but his lower body had become a stranger to him. The Drellith doctor stood beside his bed with cold eyes and a face that showed no emotion. The damage to your spine is complete, the doctor said in their native language. You will never walk again, and you will never fight again. Vorath said nothing because there was nothing to say among the Drellith people. A warrior who could not fight was not truly alive. He was a burden and a shame and a reminder of weakness that their proud culture could not accept. The doctor left without another word, and Vorath was alone for 3 days. His fellow Drellith soldiers came to visit him. They stood at the foot of his bed and looked at him with eyes full of something worse than pity. It was disappointment. Captain Dren Sahal, his second-in-command and closest friend for 15 years, came on the 3rd day. He stood in the doorway and could not seem to make himself come closer. The High Command has been informed, Dren said. They are discussing your situation. My situation? Vorath repeated, and the words tasted like poison in his mouth. You know what they will recommend. Dren said quietly. The honorable path is still open to you, and no one would think less of you for taking it. Vorath understood perfectly well what Dren meant. The honorable path meant death by his own hand. It meant ending his life before his weakness could spread shame to his family and his unit and his entire bloodline. Leave me. Vorath said. Dren left, and he did not come back. The outpost on Vareth 9 housed soldiers from 7 different species of the Galactic Coalition. They were the tall and graceful, the Zari who believed that a damaged body contained a damaged soul. There were the logical Varini, who calculated the value of every life based on what it could contribute. There were the insectoid Keth, who simply could not understand why resources would be wasted on someone who could no longer serve the hive. And there were the humans. Vorath had never thought much about humans before his injury. They were strange creatures from a strange world. They were not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest species in the coalition. They lived short lives, and their bodies broke easily, and they seemed to feel emotions far too deeply. But they kept showing up in the most unexpected places, and they kept surviving things that should have killed them. Sergeant Una Park was assigned to his care on the 5th day. She walked into his room with a datapad in one hand and a cup of something hot in the other. She was small by human standards, with dark hair pulled back from her face, and eyes that looked at him without flinching. "Commander Vorath," she said, "I am Sergeant Park, and I will be your primary care provider from now on." "I did not ask for a human nurse," Vorath said. "No one asked for my opinion either," Una replied. "But here we are." She set down her datapad and began checking the machines that monitored his body. Her movements were quick and efficient, and she did not waste time with gentle words or soft looks. "Your Dralith medical team has submitted a request to have you transferred," she said. "They say that a human cannot understand Dralith honor and should not be involved in your care." "They are correct," Vorath said. "Maybe," Una said. "But until the transfer is approved, you are stuck with me." She finished her checks and looked at him directly. "Your vitals are stable, and your upper body shows no permanent damage," she said. "The paralysis is confined to everything below your chest. I am aware of my own condition," Vorath said coldly. "Good," Una said. "Then you know that you are not dying." She said it like it was a simple fact and not a curse. Vorath did not know how to respond to that. The days passed slowly, and Vorath learned the humans were very difficult to discourage. He refused to speak to Una, and she spoke to him anyway. He turned his face away when she entered the room, and she did her work regardless. He told her to leave him alone, and she ignored him completely. "You are wasting your time," he told her one morning. "I am already dead. You look pretty alive to me," Una said without looking up from her datapad. "In Dralith culture, a warrior who cannot fight has no honor," Vorath said. "Without honor, there is no life." "That sounds like a choice," Una said. "Not a fact." Vorath felt anger rise in his chest, and it was the first strong emotion he had felt since the explosion. "You understand nothing," he said. "Your species is young and foolish, and you have no concept of what it means to be a warrior." Una finally looked at him, and her eyes were calm. "Maybe," she said again, "but my species has been breaking our bodies in war for thousands of years, and we figured out something important a long time ago." "And what is that?" Vorath demanded. "A body is just a tool," Una said. "It can be damaged, and it can be rebuilt, and it can be replaced with something new, but the person inside remains." She stood up and gathered her equipment. "Your Dralith friends have stopped coming," she said. "The Thesari think your soul is corrupted, and the Vorini have calculated that you are no longer worth the resources and the Keth. Do not even remember your name." She walked to the door and paused. "But I will be back tomorrow," she said. "And the day after that, and the day after that, until you give me a reason not to come." She left, and Vorath stared at the ceiling. He could hear footsteps in the hallway outside, and voices speaking in languages he recognized. None of them stopped. At his door, none of them even slowed down. He was already a ghost to them, but the human had said she would return. Vorath did not understand why that small promise felt like something important. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but his mind kept returning to her words. A body is just a tool. He had never heard anyone say such a thing before among his people. The body was sacred, and the body of a warrior was the ultimate expression of honor and strength. To lose the use of that body was to lose everything. But the human did not see it that way. The human saw something else, and Vorath did not know what it was outside his window. The twin moons of Vareth 9 rose slowly into the dark sky, somewhere in the outpost. Soldiers were laughing and talking and living their lives. Vorath lay alone in the dark and wondered if the human would really come back. He wondered why he cared. He wondered if there was anything left of him worth saving. 2 weeks had passed since the explosion, and Vorath had learned that humans kept their promises. Sergeant Una Park came every single day without fail. She came in the morning to check his vitals, and she came in the evening to change his bandages, and she came at random hours in between just to make sure he was still breathing. You do not need to visit so often, Vorath told her one afternoon. I am not going anywhere. Neither am I. Una replied simply. The other species on the outpost had made their positions very clear. Liaison Mektis of the Varini came to inspect Vorath's room on the 8th day. He was a thin creature with gray skin and eyes that calculated everything. They saw, this arrangement is inefficient, Mektis said. The resources being spent on this patient could sustain 3 healthy soldiers. He is not a patient, Una said. He is Commander Vorath Keln, hero of the Battle of Sethrak Prime. He was a hero, Mektis corrected. Now he is a liability, and liabilities must be eliminated or removed. Una did not respond, but Vorath saw her hands tighten in the fists at her sides. The Sari were even worse in their own way. They did not speak to Vorath at all when he was wheeled through the corridors for medical scans. They turned their faces away as if looking at him would contaminate their spirits. Their religion taught that a broken body was a sign of divine punishment to acknowledge. Vorath was to risk sharing in whatever sin had earned him this fate. The Keth simply forgot he existed. Their hive mind processed information differently than individual species. If something was no longer useful to the collective, it was deleted from their shared consciousness. Vorath had commanded Keth soldiers in battle and had saved many of their lives. Now they walked past his room without a flicker of recognition, but the worst pain came from his own people. Captain Dren Sahal, his former friend, had been promoted to take Vorath's place as commander. He passed Vorath's door every day on his way to the command center. He never stopped, and he never looked inside the young Dralith soldiers who had once begged for the honor of serving under Vorath, now whispered about him in the corridors. Better to die than to live like that, one of them said. He should have taken the honorable path weeks ago. Another agreed. Vorath heard every word, and each one cut deeper than any blade. One night, when the outpost was quiet and the lights had dimmed, Una found him reaching for the machines that kept his body functioning. His fingers were wrapped around the main power cable, and his face was empty of all expression. Commander, Una said sharply. What are you doing? Ending this, Vorath said. There is no point in continuing. There is always a point. Una said. She crossed the room quickly and took his hands in hers. Her grip was surprisingly strong for such a small creature. Let go of me, Vorath said. No, Una said. They stayed like that for a long moment. His hands trapped in hers, his eyes burning with shame and anger and despair. You do not understand, Vorath said finally. Among my people, I am already dead, and the only difference is that my body has not stopped moving. Then your people are wrong, Una said. Vorath stared at her in shock. No one had ever said such a thing to him. Before, the criticized Dralith culture was to invite swift and terrible punishment. But Una was not Dralith, and she did not seem to care about his traditions. "Let me tell you about my people," she said quietly. "Let me tell you about Earth." She released his hands but stayed close enough to stop him if he reached for the machines again. "Humans have been fighting wars since before we had writing," she said. "We have broken our bodies in every way imaginable, and we have learned to put ourselves back together. Your species is fragile," Vorath said. "Everyone knows this." "Yes," Una agreed. "We are fragile, and that is exactly why we learned to adapt." She pulled up a chair and sat beside his bed. "I had a brother named Junho," she said. "He was a soldier like me, and he was injured in a training accident when he was 23 years old." "Injured? How?" Vorath asked despite himself. "His spine was damaged," Una said. "Just like yours, and he lost the use of his legs." Vorath felt something cold move through his chest. "What happened to him?" he asked. "He wanted to die at first," Una said. "He was angry and ashamed, and he could not imagine a life without walking." "That is reasonable," Vorath said. "Maybe," Una said. "But he did not die, and eventually he stopped wanting to, and now he is an engineer who designs equipment to help other injured soldiers. He works," Vorath said slowly. "Even though he cannot walk, he does more than work," Una said. "He has a wife and 2 children, and a house full of laughter, and he told me once that losing his legs was the worst thing that ever happened to him, but also the thing that taught him who he really was." Vorath did not know what to say on Dralith. Someone like Junho would have been hidden away in shame or encouraged to end his life. The idea that he could build a new existence and find happiness was completely foreign. "Your brother is an exception," Vorath said finally. "No," Una said firmly. "He is one of millions, and humans have been doing this for centuries, and we have learned that a person is not their body." She leaned forward and looked directly into his eyes. "You are not your legs, Commander," she said. "You are your mind and your experience and your courage, and all of those things are still intact." Vorath turned his face away. "Pretty words," he said. "But they do not change reality. Words are how reality changes," Una said. "Someone has to say the new thing before anyone can believe it." She stood up and walked to the door. "I am not asking you to believe me tonight," she said. "I am only asking you to wait one more day, and then one more day after that until you find a reason to keep going. And if I never find one," Vorath asked, "then I will keep looking for you," Una said. "Until one of us succeeds." She left him alone with his thoughts. Vorath stared at the ceiling for a long time. He thought about Junho, the human engineer who had lost his legs and found a new life. He thought about millions of humans who had done the same thing across thousands of years. He thought about his own people who would rather see him dead than allow him to exist in this broken state. And slowly, like the first light of dawn breaking over a dark horizon, he felt something stir in his chest. It was not hope. Exactly. It was more like curiosity. He wanted to know if the human was telling the truth. He wanted to know if there was really a way to live without legs. He wanted to prove her wrong, or maybe he wanted her to prove him wrong. Either way, he decided to wait one more day, just one more day.